My brothers and sisters, our good news has been recorded for us by Matthew. When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching, and they said to him, "By what authority are you doing these things, and who gives you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I am doing these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" They argued with one another. "If we say from heaven, he will say to us, 'Well, why did you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for they all recorded and regarded John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." He said to them, "Well, neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go out into the vineyard today.' He answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and he went. The father went to the second and said to the same, and he answered, 'I will go, sir.' But he never went. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?" They said, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you that tax collectors and prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed. And even after you saw their transformation and their conversion, you did not change your minds and believe him." The gospel of Christ. Praise be to you, Christ. Please be seated. Well, hey everybody. It's good to see you all. We were with a group of very dear friends a couple weeks ago. And a couple weeks before that, they had a party at their house that we weren't invited to. And it really didn't bother me. We're close, but, I guess they figured that we would have to come down from Jersey or wherever, and there would be a ride. So they were trying to save us, the trip to come down. It turns out that during the meal that we're having, it turns out that we weren't invited because I'm a pastor. Now, these are really sweet, really good, very faithful, loving people. They really are. But the consideration that a pastor would be at a party where some of their friends might get a little out of line was really of concern to them. Now, you all know that generally speaking, I don't wear clericals. I don't wear the black shirt with the white collar. I really wear that most often, honestly, when I have to go to a hospital and make a visit. Because otherwise you get stuck at the door, because no one believes this is possibly a pastor, okay? So you end up having to go through all the security stuff and try and get clearance, to go upstairs. You walk in with a collar and everyone and their brother gets out of their way and points you in a direction. And you could go anywhere you want, I could end up in an operating room and no one would stop me because you're just wearing a collar. One of the reasons I'm sort of stuck on not using the collar is because generally what happens is everyone, get it? Everyone you meet and pass by, everyone says hi to you. But they're not saying hi to me. They're saying hi to this little piece of white cloth that I have on this black shirt. The other challenge that I have is it is very difficult if you are stuck in traffic and someone does something stupid in front of you, that you cannot roll down the window and start yelling at them wearing a collar. It's just not good for business. It's just not good representation. So there are challenges that come with the collar, but recognize that in these cases, right, I would rather be authentic and try to go out of my way as a recognized normal person. Now, for those of you who know me and are making all these psychological jokes, I'm talking about normal in the sense of not wearing a black shirt with a white collar, and basically saying that I would rather try to simply be like Christ, whether or not I'm wearing a collar or not. However, there is an authority that comes with wearing Even standing here this morning, there is an authority that comes with preaching. There's an authority that comes with being pastor. There's authority that comes with wearing the black or wearing a robe. People ask me all the time in texts and all, I don't understand. Sometimes you wear regular clothes. Believe it or not, this is what people talk about. Sometimes you wear regular clothes. Sometimes you wear a robe. What exactly are you doing? And so I am very honest and say, if it is hot out, I am wearing shorts underneath the robe, so I wear the robe because it is cooler than wearing clothes, with a full suit or whatever the case might be. And they are stunned by that answer. But I'm being honest. If it's hot, wearing the robe is cooler than being all dressed up or putting a suit jacket on. But in the midst of all that, there is a recognition of an authority that comes because people recognize who and what I am and respect that role. But I'm wondering whether or not there's not a disconnect there. Jesus is not a rabbi. I mean, they call him rabbi, but he has no formal training. He never graduated from any of the rabbinical schools. He doesn't have any of the proper clothing that a rabbi of his time would do. And now he's in the middle of a synagogue or the temple, and he's teaching. And people are listening to him, which is probably even more annoying. And so the people who have done the studies and have obtained their degrees and their official ordination or whatever the case might be, no one's listening to them, but yet they're listening to this man, Jesus. So it puts them off. It puts them off because by what authority, literally, by what authority are you doing these things? Because you don't have any of the background. So why are you here doing this? And so Jesus never answers their question and asks with another. The thing that comes to me time and time again is, do people not invite you to a party because they recognize that you are a follower of Christ? Is there something about who and what we are and how we live our lives, not so much in talk, and we'll get to that in a minute, but by the way you are and by what you hold dear and by how you live your life, that people isolate you saying, you're not the one that we would want to come to a party? Because I'm wondering whether or not as Christians, if there is meant to be a recognition that our lifestyles, our values are distinctly different than everyone else's. And we really should not have a problem about that. We really should not have a problem. And I honestly, I will always love the family that did not invite me to their party, but I will ultimately always love them, and I understand what their point is. It would be embarrassing for all of those people to find out that in the middle of their slapstick jokery and everything else, oh, by the way, he's a pastor. That would probably kill any buzz and any party that people may or may not be having at that time. So I get that. I could understand there's a whole conversation about how I would handle a party, and we've talked about this time and time again. Whenever I do a wedding, they always put us at a table. And of course, when everyone else comes and sits at the table, they realize that I'm the guy who just did the service, which means I'm the pastor. And every single one of them upon approaching the table are groaning, oh God, they sat us with the pastor. How much fun is this going to be, right? And so they all sit there, and of course the waitress comes and starts taking the orders. And everyone's ordering like seltzer. Could I have lemon in mine? And then when they get to me, it's, can I have a Crown Royal Manhattan straight up, no bitters? And everyone goes, what? You're drinking? And I'm like, I'm having a drink. Yes, I am, And they're like, well, wait, I'm going to change. I don't want the seltzer, And everyone changes their menu, right? But there is automatically this type of idea that comes, with this type of authority. But I don't think it's authority that is proper to anyone who is just a pastor. It should be something that unnerves everyone, if that is the right word. It should be something that unnerves everyone who knows us, because by our lifestyle, by our values, we are distinctly different. And that is really the issue. Are we noticeably different compared to everybody else? Or are we simply trying to avoid getting pointed out as being a follower of Jesus? And honestly, I think a lot of us like to keep it down low. We'll have our personal relationship. We'll try to do the best we can, but please don't push. I don't want to go there. I don't want to stand out. If people ask, do you go to church every Sunday? We get that awkward feeling inside. So what do I say? Yes. Then what do they think? Right? I think that's an issue, for all of us, and we're going to have to address that personally one-on-one with God, for sure. So Jesus says, look, you answer this question and I'll let you know the answer to your question. John the Baptist, was his baptism from heaven or was it just of earthly design? Was it something that John created all by himself? And of course, and you hear them squabbling, which is interesting, which means that Jesus probably could overhear what they're talking about, but they're looking for what is politically correct. They're looking for what is politically correct. Now, we've just went this week, I think, the debates, right? Where it's a very political season, right? And everyone's giving stump speeches and everyone, all this debating is going on. And I'm sure you're all aware of this, but, every single question, has an answer that has been canned, has been prepared in a certain way to elicit a certain response and to attract a certain base of people who would be interested in their candidate over another, so that when time comes for elections, there is the possibility that people would vote for them. So this is a full-out practice session over and over again. And if you look at the debate and you look at how fast these people talk back and forth to each other, this stuff is all sort of prepared. It's meant to be prepared. They're meant to be defensive. They're also meant to be offensive. And so in that regard, meaning that they're able to put their positions ahead of another, right? Now, for those of you who know me, I'm a pretty quick talker, but even for me, watching them on a debate stage, going back and forth with such precision, takes an awful lot of practice. And what is it? They're trying to be politically correct. In each and every answer that they're giving, it doesn't have so much to do with the truth. In some cases, there are nuances of truth, and I'm not making a judgment against everyone. Some could be more true than others. My point is that in this political arena and in this political world that we too live in, we might be looking for nuances on who and what we are in relationship to Jesus. It just happens. We see everyone else doing it, so we ourselves back away and hide ourselves because we don't want to stand out. We don't want anyone pointing at us. We don't want anyone attacking us. We don't want to be on the defensive for who and what we believe. But the point here is Jesus is saying, you better be careful, because even though you have been prepared and you have been ordained and you are a rabbi, there's a really good chance that tax collectors and prostitutes are getting into heaven before you. And that has to be annoying to hear, for them who have set their lives up. But the reality was, what they were unable to do, as the scribes and the Pharisees, at least for this group, who are talking with Jesus and Jesus is holding a dialogue with them, they were not able to see the goodness that came out of someone like John and John's ministry. Their issue was they weren't of my tradition. They weren't properly ordained or established by my tradition, and therefore he, even though he is doing good, is not a good person because he's not of my tradition, my background, does not have the blessing of my group. And I think for us as Christians, and I have been very strong on pastors who say a lot of weird, odd things, and only because I am the one who ends up getting the phone calls and trying to correct what other people have said erroneously, where people end up feeling that they are isolated and actually distanced or thrown out of the sight of God, which is just no one's purview but God's. The last I looked, he was the boss. He was a creator. We were simply creatures. And so, yes, I have been very strong about that. But at the same time, I cannot say that those very same people in other instances and circumstances may not have been motivational or influential or even been God's instrument in people's lives to bring people closer to God. For this one person that I'm talking to, or the dozens that I talked to in the course of in these situations, it went the wrong way. But that does not mean that they're entirely bad in and of themselves, But we are very quick at judging one another based on what tradition do you belong to, who gave you your baptism, who gave you your ordination, by what power and authority do you, whatever, right? We're very quick at doing that, and but we're never really looking to see what are the outcomes of these people's lives. And this is where the shift comes, right? Jesus is saying, it is really easy for you to sit here and to talk, but you did not see the results of you did not want to recognize the results of John's ministry. People repented, people converted, they found themselves drawn closer to God. God was using John in the middle of the desert, in the middle of a swamp, baptizing. And in the midst of all that, God was actually using John and changing lives. It's the actions of these people that make the difference, not the verbal statements. And that's where he's pushing back on the scribes and Pharisees who talk a really good talk, but their lives do not reflect. And this isn't me. The Gospels have story after story where Jesus says, do not follow those hypocrites. Okay, those aren't nice words. I mean, he's basically calling them out and saying that do what they tell you to do, but don't follow their example. Because, by the way, they're not doing anything that they're telling you should be doing. So Jesus already knows that there is this power play here. There are words and then there are actions. And for John, the result of John's baptism was that people actually found themselves changing their lives and drawing closer to God. Therefore, how they treated one another was impacted. See, that's really the premise of something that we've been talking about for months. I firmly believe the more time we spend with Jesus. Notice how I almost messed up there. Because it's part of our language. We say the closer we get to God, our lives will change. I'm sorry. The problem with that is we are already as close to God as we will ever need to be. The reality for us is that we have to recognize that we are that close to God and open ourselves up to receiving that God's presence in our life. But you notice how even I was just about to say how we need to do something to put us in a place that God has already put us there by his death of his son on the cross. But we think about this all the time because someone told us this stuff somewhere and it sits in our heads. And the reality is that as we are recognizing how loved we are and embraced by the Father in our everyday life, as we become more aware, then that love that we experience transforms us to loving one another more. And it doesn't matter what the words are we say, because words here, debates, are really cheap. It's really the actions that are going to make the difference. And that is what Jesus is pointing out about John the Baptist. John's actions brought about a change in people's lives, that their lives changed. We really need to stop looking at institutions and groups, social groups, whatever, based on what they're saying. And I really do think there's something here to tell us that we should be looking at how are they acting? What are they doing with their lives? What are they doing in their everyday life that makes the difference? Now, I was uninvited or never invited to that party because of what I do standing here, which is okay. I love you guys. And the problem is they're probably watching right now, horrified. but I haven't released any names or your address or your phone number, so you're okay. The reality is that that may not have happened, but the reason I wasn't invited is not something I'm embarrassed about. If they recognized, and probably if they respected me enough to know that I probably wouldn't find some of that comfortable, or their friends wouldn't find me so comfortable, that they thought it was a good idea not to do that. But that shouldn't just be proper to the pastor. That should be proper to all of us who are Christians. They should be able to see in our actions how, who, and what we are, and thereby be making this decision. Everyone should be encountering that and seeing that in who we are. Because talk is clearly cheap. But how far are we willing to risk acting as the brothers and sisters, the beloved of Jesus Christ? God bless you.